right, today we are diving into one of the most talked about personal finance books of all time, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The whole idea behind it is pretty provocative. It argues that almost everything we're taught about money by our parents and in school is just plain wrong, and that the rich, well, they're playing a completely different game with a totally different set of rules. And really, the entire book boils down to this one huge contrast. On one side, you have Kiyosaki's real dad, his poor dad, a brilliant, highly educated guy who followed the traditional path. And on the other, you have his best friend's dad, his rich dad, a guy who didn't even finish 8th grade but ended up a millionaire. As you can see, their views on money couldn't have been more opposite. To picture this, as just a young kid, Kiyosaki had to decide which dad he was going to listen to. And he figured out really early on that this choice would basically map out his entire financial future. It was a choice between two completely different ways of thinking about wealth, work, and life. And here's a look at how those mindsets really break down. Poor dad's advice is probably going to sound super familiar. Go to school, get good grades, find a safe, secure job, and whatever you do, avoid risk. Rich dad's advice? The exact opposite. He said formal education isn't enough. You need financial education. Don't look for job security, look for financial freedom. And most importantly, don't avoid risk, learn how to manage it. So, how in the world did rich dads start teaching these, pretty radical ideas? Well, it all kicked off with the very first lesson. The rich do not work for money. And believe it or not, it all started with a job offer that felt like a complete slap in the face. Yep, you heard that right. When 9-year-old Robert and his friend Mike asked Rich Dad to teach them to be rich, his response was to offer them a job dusting canned goods in his store for a measly 10 cents an hour. They'd work for 3 hours every single Saturday and go home with 30 cents. I mean, that was barely enough to buy a comic book back then. So after a few weeks of this, Robert was completely fed up. He storms into Rich Dad's office, ready to quit, and just lets him have it. He felt totally used, cheated, and like he was learning absolutely nothing. He thought the whole thing was a scam. But here's the twist. This angry outburst was exactly what Rich Dad was hoping for. He explained that the lesson had nothing to do with the 10 cents. It was about emotions. He was teaching them to see the trap that gets almost everyone, what he calls the rat race. It's this endless cycle where the fear of not having money makes you work, and the desire for all the nice things money can buy keeps you chasing a bigger and bigger paycheck. Rich Dad had this great analogy. He said a paycheck is like a carrot that you dangle in front of a donkey. It keeps the donkey moving, always chasing something it can never quite catch. For people, that carrot is the illusion of job security and the promise of a bigger paycheck tomorrow, keeping them working for someone else's dream. So what does Rich Dad do next? He makes the boys keep working, but now for free, zero pay. By taking away that tiny 10-cent carrot, he forced their brains to switch gears. Instead of thinking like employees waiting for a wage, they had to start thinking like entrepreneurs and look for an opportunity to create their own money. And you know what? It totally worked. They saw the clerk at the convenience store throwing away the front covers of old comic books to return them and tossing the rest. So they asked if they could have the old comics. They got them for free, opened up a little comic book library in Mike's basement, and charged other kids 10 cents to come in and read as much as they wanted. All of a sudden, they were making money without even being there. It was their first real lesson in having money work for them instead of the other way around. And that experience leads us straight into what is, without a doubt, the most important lesson in the entire book. Seriously, if you take away only one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. The absolute foundation of building wealth is knowing the difference between an asset and a liability. It is literally that simple. You can forget all the complicated accounting jargon. Rich Dad's definition is all you need. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. It all comes down to the direction the cash is flowing. Take a look. This is the typical cash flow pattern for most people. The money comes in from a paycheck, and where does it go? Whoosh, right back out the door to pay for liabilities. The mortgage, the car payment, student loans, credit card debt. Your money ends up working for the bank, the government, everyone but you. Now let's flip that and look at how the rich do it. They spend their lives acquiring assets, things like rental properties, dividend stocks, businesses that run themselves. Those assets then generate income. That income pays for their expenses. See the difference? The rich buy assets first. The poor and middle class, they tend to buy liabilities that they think are assets. And that thinking leads us to maybe the most controversial idea in the whole book. We are all told that buying a home is the biggest and best investment you'll ever make. But if we use Rich Dad's super simple rule, does it put money in your pocket? Then is the house you live in really an asset? Well, according to Kiyosaki, the answer for most of us is a hard no. Your main home is a liability. Why? Because every single month, it takes money out of your pocket for the mortgage, for taxes, for insurance, for surprise repairs, and all that money is capital that could have been invested into something that actually generates income for you. A rental property you own, that's an asset. The house you live in, that's a liability. Okay, so if the big goal is to stop working for money and start having our money work for us, how do we actually pull that off? Well, Rich Dad laid out a super simple map to understand the journey from being stuck to being financially free. And this is it. It's called the cash flow quadrant. Now, this isn't about how much you earn, it's all about how you earn it. It basically sorts everyone into 4 categories based on where their money comes from. So on the left side, you've got E for employee, you have a job, and S for self-employed or specialist, you own a job. The catch on this side is if you stop working, your income stops. Now the right side is where the wealthy play. B stands for business owner. You own a system that makes money without you. And I is for investor, where your money is literally making more money for you. And there's your map. True financial freedom isn't about climbing the ladder to a better job in the E quadrant. It's about building a bridge over to the right side. The goal is to create businesses and buy investments that create passive income, so that one day you don't even need a paycheck from a job anymore. When you boil it all down, the book's core message is really about taking control. It says your financial future isn't up to your boss or the economy. It all comes down to the choices you make every single time you get a dollar. Are you going to use it to buy a liability that makes you poorer or an asset that makes you richer? For decades, the ideas in Rich Dad, Poor Dad have been shaking things up, forcing people to really question everything they thought they knew about money. It pushes us to see money not just as something to earn and spend, but as a powerful tool we can use to build a life of freedom. So that really only leaves one question for you to think about. What choice will you make with your next dollar?